So this fight is a level 9 version of the Eternal Warrior. Level 9 is the first part of the game where you really get all of the abilities once you hit Act 2. I tried doing this fight without having all the abilities that I have in my build guide, and I just couldn't do it. I had to go get Skin Graft. Skin Graft actually made it possible to pull this fight off, and it was still extremely difficult to solo, but it was manageable. So the first thing I want to talk about here is positioning and how vitally important it is to builds. It's very, very good in this build, and one of the reasons we keep teleport on our bar, not only for Bone Cage to bring corpses in range, to be able to get a lot of armor from that buff, but to keep enemies sort of grouped up so you can hit them, and you can actually see the very first thing I do in this fight, which is probably something you wouldn't do in many fights, is actually move the guy on the left into range so that I can hit them all with Bulrush. Bulrush is just super good now since the patch on February 1st. It does physical damage, which makes it super viable. Previously, it did pure damage, which, you know, didn't strip armor, so once you did damage to the targets, you couldn't deal any more damage on the next attack, which CC is such a huge part of this game. Getting rid of that armor plays just a very, very important role. So now that it takes armor away, allowing you to CC with like Battle Stomp or Battering Ram, it's so good, and it has a 1-turn cooldown and sets bleeding, so you can literally just charge back and forth, which you'll see that I do throughout the course of this this fight here. It's something that, you know, you should definitely have in your build if you're any sort of melee character. Now, if you go look through my build guides, it should definitely be there for the other builds as well. You'll also notice here that I adrenalined before attacking so that I had an ability point left to hit evasion, so that I wasn't struck on the enemy's turn. Unfortunately, I still get struck here by a Bouncing Shield, which seems to, upon testing, not be affected by this skill for some reason, because I keep getting hit every time. But it does save me from taking more damage than my entire armor. So this guy here in the middle is a summoner, so every round he summons a totem, and one of the things about Executioner that really pays off in this fight, especially with things like Whirlwinds, you get that free AP for killing a target. I Whirlwind here and hit everything and get rid of the totem at the same time. So get some free damage, basically, to get that AP bonus, which is very, very crucial in succeeding in this fight. Okay, so next you see that I popped Skin Graft. This is to give me back evasion. It may seem a bit early in this fight to pop Skin Graft, considering hardly anything is on cooldown, but I tried doing this fight a few times, and if I don't use evasion right at this point, I will get killed because I simply have no armor and no way to defend against physical damage attacks, which unfortunately all 4 of these enemies do, and there's just no other way getting around it. So you can see how useful the evasion is right here. It basically made me immortal for 1 round. That's why I strongly recommend that you put it into this build. It's just so powerful on any melee build. Unfortunately, it costs 2 points into Aerothurge, but I think the ability to just basically withstand any physical damage for 1 turn, especially in combination with things like Skin Graft where you can reuse it, is just so important that it's just a must-have. So the nice thing about popping Skin Graft here was that I got to use Whirlwind again, which all the enemies are grouped up, and again I get that execution bonus, and you'll start to notice that the frozen on my weapon is starting to pay dividends now with 2 frozen enemies. It's saving me a bit of damage, and in fact, I'm not actually sure I could have pulled this off without having some sort of buff on my weapon, so keep that in mind, especially early on in the game when some enemies don't have any armor, that sometimes, you know, having status effects on your weapons may help. I wouldn't recommend worrying too much about it later in the game, but they can be useful. So next I use Bulrush, because why not? It's off cooldown. I set a couple of people bleeding, and you can see I'm trying to figure out and calculate exactly how I can CC the enemy here. Making sure enemies are knocked down or dead are vitally important here, because if they can't hit you, then you stay alive. That's really what this build is about, being aggressive, being offensive, keeping enemies pinned down so that you don't take damage. We don't have a whole lot of defensive abilities besides evasion. We have Bone Cage and Armor of Frost, but we want to try avoid using those if we can. And, you know, Bone Cage doesn't become more effective until we've killed something. So we need to kill something, or we at least need to CC it so we don't die here. So I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. I don't really have a lot of options. I can use Bone Cage, but nothing has died yet, so I'm not going to get a whole lot of benefit from it. I decided to use Armor of Frost just to give myself a little extra magic armor for a few rounds, thinking that maybe the dogs would hit me with some of their poison shots or something in a couple rounds and it might help. I really didn't have a lot of their other options. I probably should have just, thinking back, saved the AP right there and not really done anything. So had I saved that 1 AP, I probably would have used Vampiric Hunger here, which would have been a better use. I didn't have that, so I only have 4 AP for 2 attacks, so I decided to Bulrush again, because why not, it's on cooldown. And then I Battering Ram through to knock them down once more. And as you can see, I get the Executioner bonus there, and between that and Adrenaline, I've got a lot of AP left, so I charge back in with Blitz Attack, trying to take some more armor off the Summoner there. I finally get his armor down a bit, and then hit him with a Tentacle Lash in order to set Atrophy on him so he cannot attack me because I have no physical armor. So I'm sitting pretty good at this point. The Summoner summons a totem, but he can't attack, so he hits me with a Frost Grenade. The other 2 people are knocked down. Got a couple guys weak. I only have 2 AP here, so I go ahead and Bulrush again. Yes, again. And luckily, I get a kill, which gives me the 2 AP from Executioner, thank God, because I really need it. And I don't have any way to CC anybody. Everything's on cooldown, so I decide to go ahead and use Bone Cage here. Since I've actually killed someone at this point, because I don't really have a whole lot of other options. Okay, so the buffing physical armor saved me there, at least getting CC'd in any regard. Unfortunately, the Summoner buffed his armor again, which is bad news for this build, because we want to keep that armor stripped so we can keep enemies knocked down. Okay, so you can see here that I saved that extra AP, so now I Bulrush through the totems and the enemies, getting the Executioner bonus, and finishing off the totems, and somehow get hit by an attack of opportunity through the Bulrush, which was a bit strange. But then I Whirlwind and finish off the Archer, and I've got some AP left, so I go ahead and whack the Summoner just to get rid of the rest of his armor, and then use Evasion to make sure I live, or I'm not CC'd until my next turn. And again, you can see just how powerful Evasion is right there. I was about to get hit by Crippled and Knocked Down. Either one of those would have hit me. I would probably be dead. So just being able to dodge both those attacks for 1 AP was huge right there. So right here, you can see that I opted for Battle Stomp over Tentacle Lash. In this case, even though there was only 1 enemy. And that's because being knocked down means you can't do anything. Whereas only hitting him with Tentacle Lash meant he could summon another totem or God knows do what else. And I wanted to make sure I won, so I just made sure he stayed knocked down. And then on the last turn here, I hit him with a Bulrush, even though he's in range, to make sure I set Bleeding on him. So he takes that extra damage in case I don't have enough to finish him off. Then I hit him with Tentacle Lash to make sure he can't attack me, and I'm just shy, but you can see as I predicted, the bleed finishes him off on his turn. That concludes the fight. So again, this is a pretty early version of the complete build. This is Driftwood. This is the earliest part of the game where you can actually have all the abilities you really need for this build. You can get most of the abilities for this build very early in the game. I think most of them are ability level 2 in most cases, with Skin Graft really only being the one that you can get in Act 2. So it's very, very powerful. You can see here, this isn't Lone Wolf. This is just a party build. And I'm soloing groups of mobs. This is on classic difficulty, so it's not tactician. But, you know, if you're going for a party-based build and everyone in your party is self-sufficient like the Eternal Warrior is, you're not going to have any problems. You keep your armor topped up, you keep the enemies CC'd, you keep the pressure on them, you're not going to have any issues, especially in tactician, if you're not trying to solo everything with a non-Lone Wolf build. So this is a level 16 version of the build. I did a lot of my build guides at this particular part of the game. The reason for that is I felt like it was the point in the game where everyone would have access to the things that I had access to ability-wise, because a lot of them unlock around that level. And, you know, you get too much further into the game and it doesn't really matter. The game isn't a whole lot longer without going into too many spoilers. And, you know, from this point forward, you just become so powerful, you can just wreck everything no matter what you do. So I wanted to stop here, and even here is a bit you know, iffy in terms of where I would go, but it's just a good solid point to demonstrate builds, I thought. And you're going to see here what I mean in terms of, you know, you start scaling like really exponentially in terms of damage. You're going to see the Eternal Warrior build here performs much stronger than it did at level 9. I mean, it was pretty powerful then, but it's nothing compared to where it is in this part of the game. Okay, so here you can see the enemies are spread out quite a bit more than the level 9 fight, so I don't teleport anybody in. I just jump in with Phoenix Dive because I don't quite have the range with Bulrush, and I go ahead and hit with a Tentacle Lash, which is a great opening skill against a single target. It's very high damage and also sets Atrophy. Then you can see, instead of using a defensive skill here, the enemies are still quite a ways away from me. I go ahead and set Challenge on the enemy. Challenge now, as of February 1st, only costs 1 AP, which is great. And at this point in the game, it gives you about 450-ish magical and physical armor, in addition to 15% damage, if you kill the target within 3 turns, which is plenty. So you can see right away that the enemies in this fight do a lot more magical damage than physical, which is a bit different than the last fight, and will showcase just exactly how Living Armor and Vampiric Hunger and Necromancer all synergize to create a very powerful build. Okay, so the next round I go ahead and use Vampiric Hunger because I know that enemy's armor is almost gone, and I know I'm going to deal some vitality damage, and I want to get that magic armor back up. Unfortunately, I can't hit him with Bulrush, so I go ahead and use Blitz Attack, which is great for those situations. He doesn't quite die, so I go ahead and pop Adrenaline here and finish him off. So not only now have I got 2 extra AP from Executioner, but now I have an additional 450 physical and magic armor, as well as 15% extra damage per turn. And while that might not seem like a huge amount, you know, that 450 magic armor might be just the amount of armor that the enemies tear through on their turn, which basically means I didn't lose anything just by killing that one guy. So you can see I'm trying to figure out what to do here. I always prioritize physical damage dealing enemies because they strip physical armor, and you only have Bone Cage to replenish your physical armor. It doesn't work with Living Armor. Living Armor is very much a magical armor-oriented thing, so taking down or keeping pinned down targets that deal physical damage to you is of the utmost importance, because you cannot regain physical armor very often, and you cannot do it offensively. As you can see, my magic armor is already back to full. So you can see the enemies go through their rotation here, really not doing much. One summons an undead that does physical damage, but he misses because of my evasion. When it's my turn, you see that I pop Skin Graft because a lot of my abilities are on cooldown, especially Uncanny Evasion, which is looking more and more like I need, and Adrenaline because I don't have any AP, so I really can't do a whole lot, so I need to get some AP. Keep in mind that I have Executioner, so if I can kill something, I'll get 2 more AP. Well, unfortunately I wasn't able to kill anything, but I knocked down 4 targets at once, which is, you know, pretty good. So as most enemies were knocked down, and there was only one guy up who deals mostly magic armor or magic damage, I decided to save Uncanny Evasion as I figured I might need it, and decided to just buff with Armor of Frost to give myself a little extra magic armor. So on my turn, again, I have very little AP from Adrenaline. I decide to Battering Ram through them, knock them down again. And you can see the amount of magic armor that I regain here, and the amount of health, just staggering. I mean, AoEs in general just perform really well with Living Armor and Necromancer and Vampiric Hunger. And with Vampiric Hunger on it helps so much, and you can just see it. I have no trouble with magic armor whatsoever. Okay, with everyone back up, I decide to Bulrush through, end up killing the summons, get the Executioner bonus, then I use Blitz Attack to hit 2 more guys because the people are kind of spread out. I get lucky there with a knockdown from my weapon, procs, and hits the guy, knocks him down. And then I go ahead and use Evasion, which I don't really need, but I decide to use right here because this is pretty much the most damage I'm going to take here at the end of this fight. And then I go ahead and pop Challenge because I'm pretty sure I'm going to kill this guy in the next turn, and I want that extra damage bonus and armor. Okay, so I decided to go for another Bulrush right here, but as you can see, for some reason, it decides to do no damage to anyone. And then with only 2 AP left and Uncanny Evasion on cooldown, I decide to hit the Undead Destroyer, who does physical damage, with Tentacle Lash because it deals atrophy. I was hoping I'd kill him, but if not, at least he won't be able to attack me next turn, preventing that physical damage that we want to avoid. So you can see here I finished the Destroyer off with an attack of opportunity, which is one of the reasons it's really good to stay near the enemies, as you tend to get a lot of those if you're really close. And it totally replenished like almost half my magic armor just from that one attack that I didn't even have to spend any AP for. And it gave me an Executioner bonus, which I have going into my turn. I wanted to Bulrush these guys, but I couldn't get to them, so I decided to Phoenix Dive instead. And then I was going to Whirlwind, but I decided to teleport the other guy in, so I hit all 3, which is a great idea. As you can see at this point, the corpses are all sort of piling up in a spot, so this is a very good time to Bone Cage if you need it. I don't really, but I do anyway here, because why the fuck not? This is one of the reasons I keep Blitz Attack on my bar here. Don't really need it in this scenario. But you can see that I'm able to hit both targets at close range with no other skills available because I've just been spamming the crap out of them, blowing people up. And yeah, it was a good way to finish one target there and hit 2, and the other one's primed for being killed and goes down easily in the next swing. So that's the Eternal Warrior build. You can see at this point in the game, it's just really powerful. You can see by looking at my gear, it's nothing, you know, super amazing. I have a pretty good weapon that's level 14. I'm level 16 that I've hung on to because the bonuses are really good. But otherwise, my armor is pretty much just meh. But you can see the combination here, just keeping enemies constantly CC'd, keeping the pressure on with attacks. You never let off the pressure on them. The best defense is a good offense in this game, and this build just takes that and runs with it. I mean, it doesn't do anything other than just go all out and buff itself with defense at the same time for little to no AP. So that's our first gameplay video of the Eternal Warrior. If you guys like this sort of content, please comment in the comments below. We're talking about maybe doing some more gameplay videos showcasing the builds that we do. You know, we haven't particularly shown a whole lot of gameplay in our build videos. A little bit at the end to try and kind of give you guys an idea how they work, but they were sped up or you know jammed in there while I'm talking about other things. But if you guys like this, we can certainly do this for the other builds like Terramancer and Cleric, you know, and any of the other builds we do, like Juggernaut, Elementalist, and showcase exactly how, you know, how I use them, how we use them, and what sort of things make them great, and tips about them, you know, just kind of spitballing while we're playing in kind of a more informal setting. So if that's something you guys would like to see, you know, go ahead and let us know.